There are 20 teams in the Premier League. As of March 2025, 8 of them are currently undergoing or have recently completed a stadium renovation. That felt like a lot to me, so I looked into other leagues. It got even more intriguing when I did that. In the NFL, Buffalo, Tennessee, Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Carolina, and Baltimore are currently renovating their stadium or are about to. The LA Rams and the Las Vegas Raiders recently had their stadiums completed too. These stadiums aren't cheap either. Real Madrid's incredible new stadium cost 1.76 billion euros. That new stadium that Manchester United have just announced will cost 2 billion pounds. The LA Rams SoFi Stadium cost $5.5 billion. So what on earth is going on? Why are all these sports teams spending billions on new stadiums? And why now? I'm Jordan, and I'm on a mission to make passionate sports fans just like you 1% more informed. So today, along with research from Travis Levinson, we're going to break down why so many clubs are hemorrhaging their short-term futures for these stadiums, how they're funding these projects, and why they're all doing them right now. To find out, it's probably best to start in my hometown of London. Tottenham Hotspur have the best stadium in the country. Remember that season where Tottenham spent a whole summer without signing a single player? This graph showing the revenue of Tottenham going back 10 years will explain why they did that. You see, there are 3 ways in which Premier League teams can make money: broadcast revenue, commercial revenue, and matchday income. In 2014, Tottenham played here at White Hart Lane. The capacity of the stadium is just over 36,000 people. Fast forward to today, and Tottenham play here. This masterpiece has a capacity of just under 63,000 people. You can clearly see how matchday income has risen as a result of their new home. That was the exact same for Real Madrid too. The new Santiago Bernabeu, we only have 1 season of accounts in the new stadium, but the increase in matchday income as a result of playing in the new Bernabeu, it's insane. What's crazy is you're probably not that familiar with your club speaking about matchday income. And that's because for the last 10 years or so, broadcast income has been such a revenue driver for all teams across the world. The Premier League has been, in particular, fantastic for this. The expansion in broadcast revenues has been a wonderful thing for the Premier League. The increase in exposure has massively driven revenues and increased the value of pretty much everything in the sport. However, for the first time, the growth in those revenues are starting to plateau. This is a graph showing the revenues from the Premier League for broadcasting going back the last 5 deal cycles. Those increases before were insane, but lately you'll see things start to flatten out. So like before, I looked into other leagues in Europe too, and it was a similar situation across Europe's top 5 leagues. This is a graph that shows the value of the broadcast deal today and the one immediately preceding it in Europe's top 5 leagues. The Premier League is here. La Liga is doing okay. The Bundesliga is slightly decreasing. Serie A is falling. And France, yeah, there's a problem there. If you've been a follower of my channel recently, you'll know the situation that France are in. So if the broadcast rights, which have been such a big portion of teams' revenues, are starting to plateau or in some cases fall, then how are clubs going to match or increase their revenue year on year? Well, they have to take matters into their own stands. My newsletter is growing faster than ever. Join the thousands of you who receive this weekly newsletter to your email inbox every Monday at 11 a.m. UK time, breaking down a new story about the business of sports. Click here for the first link in my description to find out. Now, let me show you how much these stadiums really mean. Back to the matchday revenue point. Matchday revenue is far more controllable than broadcast revenue. Well, hold on a second. A stadium has a fixed number of seats. Once you sell out the stadium, how else can you control the revenue? It's a fair question, but the stadiums of today are not just football stadiums. They are entertainment complexes. Let's go back to that Spurs stadium. Spurs play anywhere between 19 and 25 home games a season. That delta depends on how well they do in cup competitions. Not only do Tottenham Hotspur play football at the stadium, there's also a track underneath the playing pitch for go-karting. Yes, the pitch moves to one side, allowing for a go-kart track underneath. They also host concerts. Beyonce, Lady Gaga, and 50 Cent will all perform there in the summer of 2025. Whenever there is a concert, Spurs get a slice of the commercial revenue taken from food and concessions on that day, and that's usually way more than what a football match would bring in. Boxing is there too, some pretty big fights. They also have an agreement with Saracens Rugby Club to host the Showdown every year too, which is always a sellout rugby event. They also have an excursion. You are allowed to walk on the roof of the stadium and have a look at the view across the whole of the city. I can't lie, I've done it myself. For some reason I haven't quite figured out, my dad is a lifelong Spurs fan. I took him there for Father's Day one time. It's actually quite cool. Soon, a 30-story hotel will be built on the land that Spurs own around the stadium. That will be complete ahead of Euro 2028, which will be hosted in the UK, where Spurs will host some matches. So all of this explains why Spurs matchday revenue is growing fast. Spurs have an agreement in place with Haringey Council to host 30 non-footballing events in the stadium every single year. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, that might mean that there are more non-footballing events at the stadium than there are football matches. This is what clubs can benefit from. I need you guys to understand that your football club isn't just a football club anymore. It's a real estate empire. That might sound like a weird thing to say, but with most clubs operating under a PSR or a financial fair play accountancy rules, the more money you make, the more you can spend. So controlling revenues is really important. On that point, in the UK, clubs are allowed to lose £105 million over a 3-year period when it comes to PSR. But spending on infrastructure is exempt from those calculations. So these massive stadium builds are fine and, as you can see, are very common. In addition, the additional revenue your club receives helps the club spend in the transfer market. With broadcast revenue stagnating, it makes perfect sense as to why clubs are taking these measures. So the question you probably have now then is like, how much are these clubs borrowing to make these stadiums a reality? Well, let's just say in this interest rate environment, it's a lot harder to do now than it was pre-pandemic. Spurs initially took out a £637 million loan to fund the stadium. They also secured financing from the Bank of England. Yes, the Bank of England. They've refinanced these loans now and have secured a pretty favourable interest rate on their debt. The key thing for them was interest rates were very low back then. I managed to find an article that stated the blended interest rate on all of Tottenham's stadium debts comes to 2.66%. They benefited from when interest rates were just above zero back in the UK. What a time that was. Real Madrid took out 3 loans to fund their stadium in 3 separate years. A first loan of €575 million was taken out in 2019. The interest rate here was a 2.5% fixed rate for 30 years. Again, not bad. Their second loan was in 2021 for €225 million. A third loan of just under €400 million was taken out in late 2024. The company accounts released just before I recorded this video suggested the blended interest rates on the stadium debt is at 3.2%. Again, Real Madrid have a pretty good deal here. Strong brand power, maybe different length of maturity on the loans, 3.2% blended interest rate. However, at the time of recording this video, Everton have just announced a refinancing on their stadium, the brand new Bramley Dock in Liverpool. They borrowed £350 million to fund the build of the stadium, but they started later than Spurs and Real Madrid. This news is very recent and the interest rate is not public yet. I might have to wait until their next set of financial accounts to find out. But their rate of interest will be a lot higher than Spurs or Real Madrid's. To put this into perspective, let's just assume Tottenham and Everton were borrowing the same amount of money, £350 million. And again, for my example, let's just say they were servicing this debt for 25 years. Spurs secured a 2.6% interest rate. A simple Bank of England calculator tells us that servicing that debt will cost £9.3 million every year for 25 years. It's a lot of money, but stay with me here. Everton's interest rate is unknown, but interest rates in the UK are a lot higher now than they were when Spurs took out their initial loans. Let's assume that Everton are paying 6%. That small increase from 2.66% that Spurs have to say 6% that Everton may be paying takes the servicing to £21 million per year. I know this is a very simple calculation, but provided everything stays the same, Everton over 25 years will pay nearly £300 million more than what Spurs paid. It just goes to show you how important the economic conditions are for projects of this nature. All of this then brings me to my beloved club. Jim Ratcliffe just unveiled very grandiose plans for a brand new stadium for Manchester United. In fact, it's not really just for Manchester United, it's for Manchester. And if you let Jim Ratcliffe tell it, it's actually for the north of England. I mentioned earlier, these stadiums are not just football stadiums anymore. They are real estate empires. The proposed new Trafford is not just a stadium, it is part of a regeneration process for the area of Manchester that the stadium currently lives in. Let's be clear though, the benefits are obvious. Prior to Real Madrid's new stadium, their matchday revenue was actually fairly similar to Manchester United's. In 2017, Real Madrid's matchday revenue was here. In 2017, Man United's matchday revenue was not too far different. Similarly, go 1 year later, 2018 Real Madrid matchday revenue, 2018 Man United matchday revenue. However, with 1 season of Real Madrid's new stadium, Man United's matchday revenue recently, Real Madrid's matchday revenue recently. This is what Jim Ratcliffe wants. Clubs are often valued at a multiple of revenues. When you can add a big boost of revenue to your bottom line, it will inevitably help. Also, when you're in control of your stadium and can control the revenues there, it's a big boost. Also, think of the impact on the commercial revenues that you can get from a team as well, something we haven't discussed so far, like naming rights. Weirdly, naming rights deals in Europe are often softer than they are in the US. Allianz just agreed a 10-year, €130 million extension on their deal with Bayern Munich Stadium. They just did a similar deal with Twickenham here in London. However, in America, SoFi announced a $625 million 20-year deal to win the naming rights for the new stadium in LA where the Rams play. Crypto.com paid $700 million for a 20-year deal to name the arena in which the LA Lakers play, which is crazy because that will always be the Staples Center. Real Madrid, Spurs, Everton, nor Man United have announced a naming rights deal for their new projects, but I imagine if they did, they'd be quite lucrative. It is quite lucrative at the moment for Bayern Munich and for Arsenal. And finally, back to Jim. I imagine this stadium is a pathway for complete ownership of Man United for him. It's fascinating that the Glazer family still own over half of the football club, but have this very wealthy and rich benefactor taking all the abuse from the media and making all the tough decisions about the club. If the stadium gets built and it's as good as how these graphics do look, the value of Manchester United will skyrocket, and so will the value of their shareholding. They will sit back and benefit from all the work that's been done by someone else. What a great deal that they've got. I'm Jordan. I've enjoyed this one. Thank you for the research from Travis as well. A stadium was very important for David Beckham and Inter Miami to get off the ground. So if you want to hear that story, click right here. But earlier I mentioned that French football is in a very bad place. Yeah, you might want to check that one out. Click right here to see that. Thank you for watching.